Chapter 34. The Transportation Profession and Transportation Policy. The Design of a Life. The real question is not to explain our sorry reality, but to improve it. August Loesch. Loesch, 1967, Economics of Location, is one of the great books of the 20th century. It's must-reading for anyone in planning, location economics, transportation, or geography. Written during the 1930s and 1940s in Germany by an outsider to National Socialism and the university community, the words sorry reality run deep. These afterwords will address a most difficult question. What is the reader to do with the understandings of policy absorbed from the transportation experience? How should those understandings affect the reader's work? Because each reader differs and there are many paths through life, there is a limit to how far we can work the question. We can address how understandings might be used, with their use depending on the student and the opportunities that unfold. Toward the end of the words, Garrison comments on the interactions in policy, affairs, and about the world as he would like it, a world where options are explored and new paths taken. 34.1. The sorry reality. One sorry reality is that transportation systems are not controllable in important ways. They get started, they grow and develop, and then sail in the sunset of obsolete stasis. Subject to responding to markets, systems are self-organizing and self-steering. Embedded policies play a dominant role in shaping the ways they are organized and the performance they achieve. At fine detail, society can ease barriers to deployment and subvent deployment via subsidy, control the behavior of system actors when they blatantly violate social norms, force fixes on externalities, and fine-tune deployment decisions to places and local circumstances. These are tuning policies rather than controlling policies. It seems to us that understanding the problem of control is a major contribution of the transportation experience. Control is a non-trivial matter. It deserves our attention as a transportation question. And we see the transportation question as one of a larger set of questions about the social control of technology. The question of social control is usually phrased in more limited and less deep ways. And understanding the transportation situation gives us some general non-trivial insights. Maturity of systems yields two aspects. One is that systems are not yielding on and off system improvements in the way that we have known them in the past. Transportation's external benefits and reorganizational changes have been exploited. Indeed, in some cases, service improvements are negative. The other element of maturity is the limited options available to managers and to policymakers. The options are a sorry lot because they are tinkering or tuning ones. Managers can seek to improve product quality and differentiate standardized services to minor variations in markets. With the objective of lowering costs, they strive to get the scale of production just right. They search for lower factor prices, for example, by using non-union labor. Fine-tuning pricing policy, market channeling, and product differentiation become priorities. The maturity of transportation systems deserves our attention as such, and also because of similarities among transportation systems and other maturing activities. Understanding the transportation situation yields some general non-trivial knowledge. A fourth aspect of sorry reality emerges from considering what we found when we examined how policy is studied, debated, made, and implemented. We saw iron triangles, policy being made from pure technology considerations, exercise of many against the few, and few against the many power, and end justifies means actions. Focusing on these aspects of reality, Darling sees policy as witchcraft. We would not go that far. Given the options available and the circumstances in which policy is made, actors impose their rationalities on systems. If that leads to gross subsidies for coal transport over Crow's Pass, unlike Darling, we judge those subsidies as rational. If policymakers in Los Angeles compare streetcars versus buses and opt for streetcars, we judge that decision as rational within the environment it was made. 34.2. But to improve it. To assist the discussion of the improvement of our sorry reality, shorthand expressions will be useful. 3 words will be used: control, maturity, and rationality. Control has to do with intervening in the apparent inevitability and irreversibility of the life cycle. Maturity describes the present state of affairs, and rationality has to do with ways we make judgments and decisions. Taking life cycle and control matters first, the usual prescription is to live with the tyranny of the life cycle, adopt an incrementalist muddling through prescription. There is the body of concepts in microeconomics. The situation is taken as is, production functions are fixed, optimization is at issue. We accept the need for incrementalism, but point out that incremental actions consistent with embedded policies and the movement of a system along its life cycle are one thing, and incremental actions yielding consequential improvements are another. Fulton, Stevenson and Pease, McLean, and others who created auto, air transit, and other systems worked incrementally. In the transportation situation, muddling through yields only squabbling over marginal things. Ayres, 1984, offers another prescription. He would have us track how it goes for activities and implement control when activities are in the adolescent stage in the cycle. The instrument of control would be innovation, and at adolescence, the manager-planner would make investments in R&D so as to obsolete the maturing product. In this scheme, systems avoid maturity. New products are put in the pipeline to obsolete old products just when old products begin to mature. There is action of this type in the private sector. Ayres terms this strategy, policy, or activity indicative planning. In his world, intellectual or innovation resources would be deployed here and there as needed to replace activities before they mature. Elsewhere, Ayres and Steger, 1985, argue that new technologies are changing the name of the game, offering the possibility for small-scale production. Thus, the standardization and production at large scale that lock in mature activities no longer are needed. We like Ayres' insights, but have problems with his indicative planning. It demands knowledge and insights, and it suggests that centralized allocation of resources for innovation. The latter is risky for democratic societies. Some policy wonks and business types talk about industrial planning, using Japan's MIDI as a model. That debate lacks Ayres' insights. Its essence is to how to live with mature activities, and a close examination of MIDI's activities gives only lessons on how to gain comparative advantage in mature activities. To this point, we have spoken to the life cycle and maturity as we see it in history. It is irreversible and inevitable. History says more, for new products do come along and obsolete the old. All we have to do is wait. Something will happen. While we admit it is likely that something will happen, we give this strategy little coin. As we have seen, there is lots of happenstance to what happens. There is no reason to believe that what will happen will have desirable properties compared to the universe of all things that might happen. Furthermore, while this strategy may work reasonably well in an atomistic world, in today's locked-in big system world, it may be a long time before anything comes along. In years to come, the reader will be hearing a good bit about long waves, on the order of 50 to 80-year cycles in the economy: recession, depression, recovery, recession. Observers have called attention to these waves for about 50 years, but lacking a theory and a convincing empirical base, most, such as Samuelson, have called them science fiction. But improved data and some articulate causal arguments have emerged. Understanding of the relations among investment, productivity, and innovation are at the core of the causal argument. Innovation waves are stimulated by depressions. The depressions reflect adjustments, as investments are made obsolete. That's not a pretty picture. We are not happy that life rides on waves beyond our control. We are not attracted to a wait till things change and something comes along strategy. Kant's perception of ethical behaviors is one we find useful. It takes a book to state it, but it boils down to never use others to serve one's purposes. Another version is to avoid imposing one's calculus of values and rationality on others. Kant's perception is often violated in transportation affairs and in life generally. For example, we often hear transportation planners saying, "We've got to get land use under control in order to make transportation work." We hear that in the light rail debate, but will work just fine if we control land uses. That's bothersome. A transportation person is trying to get people to do things they would not otherwise do to make transportation work. It's pushing our collective failure to develop the right kinds of transportation on someone else. Another case involves opportunity costs. Society implements lots of policies that attempt improvements by throwing money at problems. Save the cities with transit. Smart highways will manage congestion. Solve the air pollution problem by degrading combustion efficiency, and so on. We suspect those are not very good ways to go, but in the spirit of Kant, we limit ourselves to saying that and do not interfere when others proceed in that direction. But that puts us in a bind because opportunity costs are so high. We could be using resources of attention, energy, and money in better ways. Finally, there are ethical equity dimensions. There is the here and now question of vertical and horizontal equity. In our minds, though, the now and tomorrow equity question overrides. Are we doing things that are inequitable to future generations? We hear some urbanists say the public ought to invest in heavy rail. True, it won't work very well now, but think of how wonderful it will be for future generations. That's a mind-bending way of thinking. 34.3. Design of a life. What is the reader to do? Does deep knowledge of our sorry reality immobilize us? Are problems so tough that nothing can be done? Garrison, who has been involved in many things and claims to have done no harm, says, "I manage by wearing two hats. I wear one hat when judging whether or not to enter ongoing affairs. I wear a second hat when debating goals, programs, opportunities, the allocation of intellectual resources, and such. There are thousands of policy debates ongoing at any time. For reasons of where one happens to be or whom one happens to know, the professional has the choice of entering the debate or sitting out the debate. The question boils down to when to enter and when to sit out, subject, of course, to limits on energy, attention, and time. The answer to the question has to be tempered by judgments of probability of something happening. One question to ask of an opportunity is the extent to which it addresses making a mature system work better. We know, for example, that anything that better matches a mature product to markets is an improvement. We can be alert to whether the opportunity is concerned with on-system or off-system payoffs. Will there be a direct confrontation with low likelihood of changing embedded policy? What magnitudes of payoffs are involved? Armed with understandings from the transportation experience, the reader ought to be able to work with efficiency and taste. There are ethical questions that bear on the enter, sit out decision. As already remarked, we hesitate to impose our values on others, so we sit out when decision makers choose differently than we would. But at the same time, we are quick to speak out when we see those in power using others for their purposes. We have found the "that's immoral because" statements effective in many circumstances. The "what to do about the state of systems" question is central. Aware of the system's problems, we have some ideas about desirable system attributes and how change might be achieved. Indeed, we have some ideas about specific designs that might be desirable. But not wanting to impose our will on others, we talk and write using a widely scoped view of our circumstances. We emphasize process rather than products, verbs rather than nouns. As a result, we hope readers better understand their circumstances and that those who are in the right place at the right time try out some designs that might be system-changing. We hope scarce resources are not dissipated on unfruitful efforts. The fact of the matter is that strategy hasn't worked very well. People want specific what-to-do guides, build this, build that. That's what we want too, but we want specifics to be found in a world where folks holding rich understandings of transportation and using integrative ideas identify many options. That's a lot more than just the few things we can imagine. In such a world, society could choose from a menu of options that open rather than close opportunities for future generations. We would like a learning, self-organizing world in place of an accepting, reacting world. These last remarks are drawn from the designs of our respective lives as transportationists. With them, we leave the design of a life as a transportation consumer or professional as an exercise for the reader.